I am Brad Keeler. He is Lawrence Taylor. Chris Woods. Next up on Director's Cut, hear him tell you about the most average shortstop in Major League Baseball history. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keeler. I'm the director of the Geo Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week, I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell. Some of them are personal, some are professional. What do they have in common? They're all fun. If you don't know anything about the Geo Institute, after you watch this interview today, you should head over to geoinstitute.org. While you are there, you will probably find out that we are a membership society, a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you're going to see today, and I think you will, you should click like, subscribe, get notifications, and we'll let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. With that out of the way, you will notice that my guest and I are wearing special attire this week. I'm not dressed in my regular old plain t-shirt. Instead, I wore a branded Baltimore Ravens t-shirt. Week one of the NFL season has come and gone by the time you see this, but that's okay. My guest and I are prepared for it. And joining me this week, Vice President at Densification Incorporated in Leesburg, Virginia, it is Chris Woods. Chris, welcome.
How you doing, man?
This is going to be so much fun today. I'm glad we're celebrating the start of the football season. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Obviously, You're in your Giants gear celebrating the 1980s and early 1990s. We are going to hit you with 10 questions, the same as we do everybody every week. And we start with one of the two that we ask everyone. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Oh, man, 45 seconds. Well, I could describe it in one sentence, right? Get stuff done, right? So as a contractor now, my job is to go find the jobs, procure them, design them, and get them done, and then get paid for it. I mean, that's the short version. The best part about it is there's no timesheets involved with this gig, right? It's just let's go get the work and get it done and make the clients happy along the way. So hopefully they come back for some more work later.
I'm glad you elaborated beyond get stuff done, because I was going to say usually these are about a half hour and we're going to need some filler there at the end.
So no, it'll be good. By the time people are listening to this answer, Giants will be 0-1. We'll be moving on with life. Yeah, no, we're good.
We have lots of fun questions too on Director's Cut. We're going to start with those right now, or maybe this is not a fun one. I don't know. Thinking back to middle school or high school, what was your favorite unit, your favorite sport to play in gym class?
It was always baseball or softball. Like I went through this phase in life where I was like deluded into the fact that I was going to be a professional athlete until I came to grips with the fact that the genes I was provided by my parents were not really, that wasn't going to happen. But I played baseball until I was close to 30. So it was always baseball and softball.
So a follow-up question here. What was the moment where you realized you weren't going to make it? Because I think for me, I remember looking at the NHL draft results in 1997 and being like, that guy's younger than me.
Yeah.
And that was the time where I was like, this is not happening.
Yeah, I think like the second time I didn't make my high school baseball team, then I was like, okay, maybe we ought to focus on a different career path here, you know?
More academic pursuits, perhaps.
That's yeah. I mean, there's plenty of people that are going to hopefully be watching this that can attest to my academic prowess. Yes, definitely.
So I mentioned that you guys are in Leesburg, which is, I don't know, 30 miles, I guess, northwest of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Most of the work that you guys do is not in the D.C. area, though.
Not at all.
Which is kind of fascinating. What are some of your current projects? And what's unique about them?
Well, the geography makes it unique, right? There are certain parts of the country where we do more work than others just based on the soil conditions, right? You get up in the Northeast, you got a lot of reclaimed fill sites or mine spoil sites. So Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, we're always busy up there. Florida, down south, lots of landfill type sites that we're busy. And then it kind of comes and goes, right? We'll work in Ohio, we'll work in Chicago. You know, some years we might be real busy in Tempe or down in Phoenix, right? They got a lot of fill materials down there. We're going to be very fortunate. We got another job coming up in Puerto Rico over the winter. I may have to actually go be the superintendent on that one myself. That ought to be pretty good in the winter. But you know, it's just a matter of where the soils are conducive. There are some parts of the country that we don't really touch too much, but at the end of the day, I think this year we'll work everywhere from New Hampshire to Puerto Rico and then over to Arizona.
So what are your top, I mean, maybe you have to be careful so that you don't irritate somebody when you say this. What are your top like nightmare soils if you had to make your top 3 list?
Well, it's not so much the soils, it's the type of year, right?
Okay.
So we're getting ready for that time of year where we got a bunch of GCs that think we're just going to plow right on through the winter conditions, right? So dynamic compaction, you're picking a big weight up in the air and you're dropping it, with the idea being that the soil's loose and you're trying to compact it. So when the top 2 feet of that soil is a block of ice because of frost in the middle of the winter and the weight's just bouncing off of it, or it's a wet, sloppy mess because it's rained all fall, right? That's the biggest challenge. As long as the soils are somewhat dry, we can come up with different ways and different ideas of getting after it. But this damn the torpedoes approach that some of these GCs want to take tends to be the most angst I have during the course of a year.
So I'm happy you brought up dropping the big weight, because it gives me an excuse to put a link in the comments to the video that you guys submitted a couple of years ago that we put in the Geo Congress opening video.
There you go.
And it is amazing. It looks fantastic. And I will be sure to put a link to that down in the description under the video.
Excellent.
So now we're going to move on to another fun question. Or again, I keep calling these fun questions. Somewhere, somebody, there's a director's cut guest who's like, why is he asking me all this stuff? I hate reading. I hate books. I hate middle school gym. What's the first book you remember reading?
I had to think about this. When you sent me over the questions, I tried to I had to dig back in the memory bank for this one.
What director's cut is all about, Chris?
My honest answer is the earliest thing I remember reading is like Marvel comic books, right? Which probably explains like my infatuation with the MCU now, right? You know, I mean, me and my daughter, it doesn't matter if Iron Man's on TV 38 times in a week, we're going to watch it. My wife will just walk through the room, roll her eyes and go back, wherever she was going. But I think that probably has something to do with it, all the comic books when I was a kid.
So logical follow-up question here, because I always grill my wife about this too. When there's a movie on TV that you love, that you also own, why do you put up with it on TV? Having the commercial breaks and all that stuff. Sometimes they have the commentary. Why deal with that?
Look, the commercial breaks, you can go get a drink or you can fast forward, right? But what you don't do is change the channel. You watch it. Like, it doesn't matter, right? If Varsity Blues is on 400 times in 1 week, I'm watching it all 400 times. Like, there's no way around it.
That's your non-Marvel movie?
That's one of them. I mean, we could go Indiana Jones. We could go Armageddon. My wife hates when Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck are trying to save the world from a giant meteor, but I mean, I think that one's great, right?
Slightly unrealistic.
Oh man, come on, right? NASA can do anything.
That's the American spirit right there.
That's it. That's it. Absolutely, man. Yeah, we can. This thing will get off the rails real quick when we want to start going down a movie wormhole.
Well, instead, what we're going to do is give the people a little taste of the DC suburbs now.
Oh, yeah. All right. Let's go down that wormhole. Sure.
You live and work in Loudoun County, Virginia. For people who don't know, again, this is about 30 miles northwest of Washington, D.C. It's a suburban community. It's exploded in population in the last 25 or 30 years. There are a lot of Chipotles. in Loudoun County.
There are. Yep.
To you, what is the most distinguishing characteristic of Loudoun County?
You know, if you had asked me that question 10 years ago when I first moved here, I probably would have said the green space, you know, something nice. I mean, there are parts of Loudoun County that are extremely scenic, the western part of it, but anyone that lives or spends time in Loudoun County at this point would 100% agree with me that our most distinguishing characteristic is data centers, right? Like, I think it's some asinine number, like 30 or 40% of the world's internet at some point flows through
Yes.
the data centers. I mean, you could get from West Virginia to Fairfax County probably just skipping along the roofs of data centers as you're coming through Loudoun County. You know, it's probably nice for me to say, being in the construction industry, right? We're always happy when construction's going on, but you know, at some point it's like, come on, man.
And there are a lot more going up, a lot more every day. So thank you to everyone who likes to store all their stuff in the cloud. You're effectively supporting the economy of Northern Virginia while you do that, and we're
That's
we're
it. Oh yeah, and
eternally
if any of my GC friends from like Clark or HIT or any of the folks that are building those data centers, I'm just kidding. This is just to get clicks, man.
The other question we ask everybody who comes on Director's Cut is, how did you first get involved in ASCE and GI?
So I think back when I was in grad school at Virginia Tech, the Geo Congress, this is probably like, I don't know, 99, 2000, somewhere in there. The Geo Congress that year was in Blacksburg. And so as a incoming grad student, I went down to that and just saw where the value was. I mean, you know, you're a little wide-eyed when you're, you know, a student or you know, entry level kind of thing. But as I've kind of progressed in my career, being able to get involved on the committee level is really where it kind of started. Being able to get involved and help out with some various committee initiatives. That's sort of grown. You know, I've been able to take some, you know, leadership position within the Soil Improvement Committee. I think I'm about 7 years in now, working with Jim Withiam on the editorial board for Geostrata, which has been fantastic. And, you know, the most recent ASC thing, probably the biggest ASC thing I'm involved in right now is we're working to rewrite a standard. There's a group of about 50 or 60 folks from the industry that are working to write a foundation standard that would effectively replace Chapter 18 of the IBC. And why I was real interested in getting involved in that is because it's actually the first time that we're taking a crack at putting some sort of code to ground improvement, right? There's shallow foundation codes out there, deep foundations, but there's never been anything towards ground improvement. And so it's proven to be every bit as challenging as we thought it would, coming up with something from scratch.
You kind of answered all my follow-up questions there, but I do have one comment to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
The Blacksburg Conference was 2001, and I can't believe you don't remember this because the tagline was 2001,
yeah,
a Geo Odyssey.
That's right. That's right. I should have known that because then I started class down there for my master's in the fall of 2001. So, yeah. God, my mind is, you know, I'm in my mid 40s, man. Cut me a break.
We appreciate the plug for the standard too. Shout out to Billy Camp and Dan Stevenson on that one. And it's been fantastic to see this moving forward. I think it's really important that GI does get more involved in standards activities when it applies to us. We're not just going to go randomly do it. But we really appreciate your involvement in that, and it's going to yield great things. I am positive of that.
Absolutely.
When this airs, when we're taping this, but also when this airs, we are in the heart of September. It is back to school time in many parts of the United States, and even if it's not, you recently went back to school. You are so unbelievably involved in, we'll call them youth activities. How do you survive September and the back to school grind every single year?
Well, so this is a two-part answer. Number one is we kicked one of them out, right? Like we got him off to college now. So we went from man-to-man defense to zone defense. And then the second part to the answer, frankly, I mean, it's smoke and mirrors on my part. I married up, right? My wife handles the lion's share of all of it, right? I'm coming and going, travel in this conference, this job site. I'm in, Chicago one day, Florida the next. So she kind of bears the brunt of it. But as they're getting a little older, it's a little easier, for sure.
I told you my theory before we started recording that week 4 is the worst, that everything just deteriorates until that. And then you get in some kind of routine, or your body is so worn down from it that somehow you just don't care anymore.
I think it's it's a numbness. I think it's a numbness. Yeah.
That lasts until about Thanksgiving.
Either that or it takes 4 weeks to start hitting the scotch, right? Like it's one or the other.
But both excellent coping strategies there.
I'm not here to judge anybody.
You mentioned in your answer about being involved with GI that you've been a GeoStrata editor for the past several years. I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize about that publication is that it's completely volunteer driven.
That's right.
Staff do some small parts of it, the news and notes and the calendar, and we do the design and the ads and stuff. But it's almost entirely, the content is almost entirely written by the volunteers. So for you, what has been the most rewarding part of being involved with that, being a GeoStrata editor?
I think what I like the most is, it's a bi-monthly publication, right? So we get it every other month. And I think it's just kind of nice to pick up and flip through something and be able to see the articles that I helped work on, right? You've helped create this content that people are interested in. I mean, I think the last number I heard was there's some like over 11,000 subscriptions to that magazine or something like that, right? So clearly a lot of people are reading it, but it provides as an editor, right? We're working with the writers to kind of go back and forth through the editorial process, and you're working with 4 or 5 different people a year that you might not have known otherwise. So you're getting to interact with people in different parts of the industry and meeting people maybe that you didn't know. So the next time you run into them at a conference or something, it provides a different way to meet some people in the industry as well.
We appreciate you working on it for so long. I think that's one of the signature things that GI does is publish GeoStrata.
Absolutely. Well, look, I work and I help out with it and being one of the editors. The lion's share of the credit goes to Jim Withiam and Christy Kehoe, right? Jim's been shepherding that thing for 20 years, and Christy's cracking the whip and making sure the technical writing's on par. And so, a lot of it falls to those guys, but it's a nice group of people to work with. It's a very, we're people from all over the country. And so it's been a lot of fun to be part of.
And Christy's been there all but 3 of those years, I think. So between the 2 of them, they're at 41 years on GeoStrata.
That's it. And when you got the 2 of them at the helm, it really does make it very easy for the rest of us.
Well, that's great. Everybody pick up your copy of GeoStrata, look at the masthead in the front, see who the editors are, and maybe send them an email and say thanks for putting everything together for them. We have pretty much, even despite our attire, we've made it through this entire interview without getting derailed on some sports topic, which is relatively impressive. That's where we're going now. We teased the sports at the beginning. First, we have to ask the real question, and then we'll have the follow-ups.
Okay.
For you, a native of New Jersey, we'll call it the New York metropolitan area, and we're going to irritate everybody that lives in New York City now.
Yep.
What is the most underrated moment in New York sports history?
This question took me about 4 nanoseconds to figure out the answer, but it's to me, as a Mets fan, it's September 21st, 2001, the first game that the Mets played after September 11th. When Mike Piazza hit the game-winning home run. They won the game. It wasn't a playoff game. It wasn't anything like that. But I don't ever remember like a bigger home run in my life. So that to me that's number 1, and then everything else is fighting for number 2 somewhere down the line.
So this one we didn't talk about before we started recording, but I just thought of this. I wanted to ask you, what do you most remember about those days before sports came back or right after they came back. I mean, I think there was this group of people at the time who were like, sports are silly. We don't really need this. People get on the telecast and they talk about how it's a battle and it's a war.
Yeah.
We can never say that again. But I mean, remembering for us down here, we didn't have the Nationals then. When the Orioles came back, the president went and threw out the first pitch, and the games in New York were a huge deal. I mean, what did it mean to you personally, like as an American during that time?
I mean, that was a tough deal, right? I mean, that's, those of us our age. I mean, that's, I had moved down to Blacksburg to start grad school 2 weeks before September 11th, and for the 5 months before that, I was in a site in North Jersey where I was staring at the Trade Center every day, right? So I'm down in Blacksburg with a lot of people I had just kind of met and everything, and not knowing what was going on, up at home was a little bit of a challenge. Being from New York, from New Jersey, that being, at home was a little tough. But, with the sports piece of it, I think, it was, they canceled the NFL the following week. It took about 10 days for baseball to come back, that kind of thing. I think by the time it rolled around, honestly, I think that everyone was just looking for something to grasp, something that wasn't the 10, 11 day cycle of literally nothing but footage of the Trade Center still on fire. And so when you had that come back, I mean, it seems like, these days living in DC, it seems like we've kind of forgotten what that was like, coming together as Americans, because now, half the country is ready to rip the throat out of the other half of the country, right? But seeing those big American flags on the field during the games, Piazza's home run, George Bush coming to Yankee Stadium to throw out a first pitch. I mean, it was, not that that's ever a time that you're going to look back on in your life as like something like a fond memory, but it's, I don't know, it's an interesting thing to like look back on,
So I asked you too before we started here, because I've always wondered this and never asked anybody else this question. How long do you think it was before you went a day without thinking about September 11th?
It gotta be 5 years, right? I mean, I'm not special. I mean, I knew people in the towers. I had family members that were supposed to be in the towers. My father-in-law at the time was working in the Pentagon. He just wasn't there that day, right? I mean, it's anyone that's from up in that part of the world, like, you have one of those stories. Like, I'm not, by a long shot, I'm not unique, right? And then it was, going back to work and, the Tunnel to Towers run that happens in New York every year. That, that was a coworker, the firefighter that died, Steven Siller, his nephew, George, was a coworker of mine at Langen. And, and so it was just, there was always just kind of reminders for a long time, right? I mean, Bruce Springsteen wrote an entire album about September 11th. You hear that, and then I was fortunate enough to be on a team that worked to do the Empty Sky Memorial, which is New Jersey's memorial to September 11th. It was built in Jersey City. I did the foundation design for that. So there was always these reminders, like every day, for a long time as to what you were, doing.
Of course, everybody at GI, all of our members, our thoughts are with those who lost people on that day, who knew people that were somehow involved directly with that day. And, for those of us who are a certain age, it's kind of our Pearl Harbor Day. We'll remember it every year. I think I would also urge people to go to the 9/11 memorials. We went to the one at the Pentagon earlier this summer, and it is a fantastic memorial. It's beautiful. It's very moving, and it's a great place to just spend some time and reflect.
Absolutely.
We got away from sports there for a long time, which was totally unintentional.
Well, look, it's hard not to, right? I mean, as we sit recording this, September 11th is in 2 days, right? So it's on a lot of people's mind, but absolutely.
We do have to ask the question about what we teased in the open here.
Right.
What do you think is the most overrated moment in New York sports history?
Well, so I told you that from an underrated standpoint, that took me about 4 nanoseconds to answer, right? whatever less than that is, it was to come up with the answer. The most overrated thing about New York sports on any level, on any day, no matter what way you look at it, is anything having to do with Derek Jeter. Like, that guy had the benefit of playing in a stacked lineup, built all these stats, wasn't even the best shortstop on his own side of the infield once they got Alex Rodriguez. And yet this schmuck, waltzes into the Hall of Fame on a first ballot, basis, right? Like, I mean, that guy's just the worst.
As a Tigers fan, as a kid, I loved Alan Trammell. Never understood why Alan Trammell didn't get the love that Derek Jeter did. That's my frustration with Jeter, and he's from Michigan, and I still have that frustration.
Yeah, I don't know that guy's the worst. But that's we could do an entire podcast on why Derek Jeter's awful. But
and we wouldn't be the first.
Yeah, I know.
I would like to search that actually in the iTunes store.
That's it. I'm sure it's there multiple times.
So the final real question before we go into bonus mode here.
Absolutely.
In a couple of weeks, DFI 47 is coming up in National Harbor, Maryland, which if my house were on a hill, I'd be able to see that Ferris wheel.
There you go.
Over there across the river in the other state that we never mention. You are technical chair this year, or co-technical chair.
Co-technical chair, yes.
How are you going to remember your year as technical chair of the DFI annual?
In some respects, a little bit of a blur, right? Because it seems like yesterday that I got the call from Teresa asking me if I was interested in that role, which I jumped all over. I think I've met a ton of people. The chair of the conference, Sebastian Lobo Guerrero. Sebastian. I've had the pleasure of being co-chairs for the technical portion with Hannah Iazzoni from Keller. The entirety of the programming committee and the conference committee. It's been a lot of fun to see something come from, a couple teams calls a year ago into like, all right, what direction are we going to take this thing in, to, we're putting out the publications and Jamie and Valerie and Angie, the whole DFI team, getting everything out there, seeing what this program's turned into, has been a very kind of rewarding process to go from, beginning to end. And we're looking forward to seeing a lot of attendance. This was supposed to take place at National Harbor 2 years ago. And that whole COVID thing got in the way. Right. So after coming back in Vegas last year, now having the opportunity to come back and do this this year has been fantastic. And, I think we're very much looking forward to the conference. And I think that when it's over on October 7th, on October 8th, that my email will finally calm down a little bit. Right. So that'll be a good thing.
So everybody can come down to National Harbor, meet Chris. You can see me at the DFI conference. I'll be there at least a couple of days, manning the GI booth. And it's going to be a good time. I think that's probably my cell. We'll have the link down in the show notes underneath this video. It is now time for the bonus question. That's an easy one, I promise.
Yep.
We got all dolled up here today.
That's it.
Prediction for the NFL season. You can give your Giants prediction and then maybe your Super Bowl picks.
Okay, so, the Giants prediction is easy. Terrible. Not quite as terrible as the Jets, though. I think we're going to be less terrible than the Jets, which is good. Although the Jets quarterback turning out to be like a Stifler's mom kind of guy, we're all right with him. But the Jets are going to be terrible. I think the Super Bowl, watching that game last night, I think it would be tough not to pick the Bills.
Yep.
But we also have seen them, get to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row. And, we know how that ended. So, but I think it could be the Bills, not the Cowboys. They're going to be terrible also. That's a guarantee. Maybe against the Rams again. I don't know. We'll see. But I think the Bills are probably the favorites right now.
So when you say terrible for the Giants, are you talking Dom Capers 8 and 9 terrible, or do you think they're just going to bottom out and win
No,
4
I
games?
think we're talking like 8 and 9 terrible, but like bad enough to like cut ties with Danny Dimes here at quarterback and move on. You know, maybe we'll get to draft our boy Caleb Williams from Gonzaga, right, who's playing out at USC now. Maybe the Giants will get to draft him next year after Danny Dimes throws his 58 interceptions this year.
Always great to see DC products make the NFL. So I'm going to go with my Ravens predictions right now. I'm going to go 12-5. I'm going to say they win the division. I'm going to say they make the Super Bowl, but do not win. And I will have them losing to the Rams.
Wow, your optimism is astounding.
I'm ready for action, man.
I think at best they're third in the division.
I'm gonna go 12-5. They're winning the division. Rashad Bateman's a beast. Everybody watch out. Minnesota product.
Man. You got to deal with Joe Burrow, and then you got to deal with my boy Kenny Pickett, who's going to take over in Pittsburgh.
That is true.
Right? Kenny Pickett, Ocean Township representing. We went to the same high school. They just renamed our field after that dude. So I think he'll be the quarterback before long. And you got problems there too. So
anybody out there, our viewers who don't like the NFL, I apologize for what we just did there for the last couple of minutes. Maybe you learned something, though. Maybe you'll go and you'll take that and you'll watch the NFL this week on Thursday or Sunday or Monday. Just take a gander, watch a game, and get into it. So, Chris, you made it through all the questions today. You did so with flying colors.
I was nervous. I was like... I was real nervous before we got on here. I was kind of like over in the corner crying a little bit. Like I get scared with this stuff.
I still make it an accomplishment for everybody. For our viewers, if you liked what you saw, and you probably did because you're here at the end, click like, click subscribe, click get notifications. And again, we will let you know every last time we post something to the YouTube channel. So Chris, thanks again. Thanks for the thoughtful answers and for doing this in general.
Hey man, this was great. I've been watching these for a while, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to come on with you, man. This is great.
And to our viewers again, we will see everybody with a brand new Director's Cut next week.
Ahead.
We could be like next on Director's Cut.
Yeah. Why Derek Jeter sucks.
Well, I was gonna go more subtle.